So one of the things that I've mentioned at each of the introductions is that part of what this symposium comes out of is thinking about land acknowledgements and the institutionalization of land acknowledgements at institutions like Brown, what it means to say, start events by saying something like, we are on traditional Narragansett and Wampanoag territory, and whether or not that actually does the work of inviting us to think about those relationships, historical relationships and the responsibilities that we have to local communities and to the land. And so that was the premise that when I asked these folks to be on this panel that I proposed. And so these moments of land acknowledgements are meant to recognize, I think, in the best way to recognize local tribes and nations, to make us aware of Indigenous presence. And I think that's especially important at a university like this one, where part of what makes it unique is how many different places people come from at this university. So I've also taught at Western Washington University in Washington State. Most of our students come from Washington State, so they're familiar with the area. Brown, we have people from sort of all over the country, all over the world coming. So this goal of thinking about how to orient people to place sort of really quickly and importantly seems like a very important question. And then I just saw the other day that the Daily Herald did their yearly poll, and they found that 85% of students reported that they didn't plan on staying in the area after graduating. So then thinking about how to really ground people in this place for the time that they're here, and thinking about what those responsibilities are to this place as people who aren't thinking that they're going to build a long-time home here, but still live here, and to how to sort of talk to people about what responsibilities we have as we live here, even if we don't plan on staying here for a long time. I was surprised by that statistic, but then I was like, I'm from New England and I moved away too, so I guess I understand. So there have been a lot of local or recent Native scholars who have sort of pushed back against the practice of land acknowledgements too. Two of the people I was looking at were Hayden King, who's an Anishinaabe scholar, and then Korean Métis writer Chelsea Vowell, who thought about, I love Chelsea Vowell's words here. She says, maybe we can move beyond territorial acknowledgement to ask hard questions about what needs to be done once we're sort of aware of Indigenous presence, that's what she says. And to then think about how we can actually be in good relationship with local people, with the land, and with the water. And so that was the purpose of this panel, was to sort of ask that question here in this place. So I'm going to just briefly introduce each of these folks and give them the chance to introduce themselves to you. So we have Lorén Spears here. She's the executive director of the Tomaquag Museum and an adjunct lecturer with the John Nicholas Brown Center for Public Humanities and Cultural Heritage, teaching a class right now, or not right now. Well, she's going to teach us right now for sure, but she has a big day planned. And then next to her we have Nitana Hicks Greendeer, who is a Presidential Diversity Postdoctoral Fellow in American Studies and Native American Indigenous Studies, and a Brown alum. So a lot of different, I'm sure you'll have many things to tell us about this place. And then we have Moraza-Keeswood. I'm sorry, I should have asked. Keeswood. I should have just gone with it. Who is the coordinator of Native American and Indigenous Studies with the Office of the Provost, and also a Brown alum, and will soon be moving on from Brown University to very exciting things. So we're so excited to have gotten you in this this last little bit of time that you're here. And then we have Ruth Miller, who is a soon-to-be Brown alum. She's a senior, finishing her thesis now in her mind, probably. Right now. And she's also the co-coordinator of the Native Heritage Series. And then we have Raelee Fourkiller, who is a first-year student, and she is the co-director of Natives at Brown. So lots of busy schedules up here. So we're so thankful that they've all taken the time to come with us. And so I emailed each of the panelists this question. I'll repeat it here. And so what will happen is each of them will speak for about 5 to 10 minutes. They'll introduce themselves to you in the way that they feel is most appropriate. But this is the question that I posed to them. How do you think we can move beyond territorial acknowledgement and towards being in good relation with the land and its people, both here at Brown and in Providence, in Rhode Island, and the Northeast, the Dawnland more broadly? What practices, initiatives, protocols, or relationships can be developed, changed, or adjusted to begin this process? just a small question. So we'll start with Lorén. Thank you.
Ascui Kwasin, Natasuis Makasini Pashao at Nahai Gansek, Natasuis Lorén Spears at English at Ni Nahai Gansek Naghantek, Kanupiam at Aki at Nahai Gansek Wampanak, Nipmuk Nahantek. So, hello everyone, I'm Lorén Spears. My traditional name is Makasini Pashao. I'm Narragansett Niantic. Welcome to our homelands. And I sort of didn't totally follow the directions, so bear with me as I get into this. But I have been very much in wanting to think about the land first before I answer the question. The homeland that I'm on, there's a song that we have in our community called Yunuweekend, which means we dwell here. And when that song is sung sometimes as an acknowledgement to remind people that this is our place, our homeland, but it's also a song that sometimes is sung in funerary ceremonies because it's talking about not only do we live here now, but our ancestors are here, our life ways are here, our spirituality is here. Everything about who we are as Indigenous people, as Narragansett Niantic people is here in this landscape. And so when I was thinking about the sort of title of the series and the title of this talk, it really brought me back to that space. And so whenever I'm asking someone to be an ally and start thinking about who is the first people here, I want them to be grounded and rooted in that everything that I am is from this place. So my pictures are mostly just pretty. So the name for the Niantic people is the people of the point of land, and the name for the Narragansett or Nahai Gansek people is the people of the small points, which are very similar. And it has to do with the terrain that's in Rhode Island, or what we now call Rhode Island, our own homeland, Nahai Gansek. And so all the place names that you see around here, people drive around this place and they see Pawtucket, Patuxet, Weekapaug, Uskapaug, Quanakintog, Wonosquatucket, and you just keep going. And sometimes they just have absolutely no idea what they mean or where they're from. For those of us that have been longtime Rhode Islanders or longtime New Englanders, we might know it's an Indigenous name, but a lot of immigrants have absolutely no idea. But all those places are really important and really connect us to the place. But more so than just literally. So Misquamicut, for example, means the place of the red fish. But for our people, it's not just the place that people take a swim today. It's the place where our ancestors had a whole life way around gathering and fishing for the salmon as it went upstream from the ocean to the rivers, and how that's all connected, and how all those life ways are connected to who we are, and how they're interrupted by colonization and industrialization and the damming of America, so to speak. So I think that we very much try to live in balance historically with this landscape, but even through today, Indigenous people try to be connected to the lands and the waters. And I love pictures like this because this happens to be a place where we go cranberry picking, and it's very remote. When you're in this space, unless a plane flies over above, you almost feel like you're back in time. And it's so spiritual because your ancestors walked the same place, and they did it for sustenance and survival, if you will. We might not have to survive. We can go to the store and buy ocean spray if we want. But there's something about spiritual and cultural survival that's steeped into this land and steeped into these places that are so special and sacred to us. And so when I think about all of these things, that's really important to me. And so we want to make sure that everyone understands who we are, why we're here, how our community's here, how our history is here, but how we're here still today, and that our history is just intersecting with Rhode Island and or U.S. history. I say this over and over and over again. There is no such thing as Rhode Island history without Narragansett or other Indigenous histories of this area, and there's no such thing as U.S. history without Indigenous history. And what our allies, Brown University and other places, can do is stop teaching it in a bubble. We're not a little separate little unit that can be fanciful and mystical and magical, which often it is, presented that way, especially K-12. It's part of. There is none of the other without our intersection. And this morning when we were looking at the maps, you know, they can erase us from the maps, they can change the maps, but the reality is they didn't come to be, the colonies didn't come to be, Roger Williams didn't come to be without the intersection and relationship with Indigenous people, with the Narragansett people. And I think, you know, when you keep thinking about kinship and relationships, we had those kinship relationships with our own people and the other Indigenous communities around us, but we tried to create those relationships with Europeans when they were coming here as well. And despite us, they just didn't understand. Just some more pictures, I'll skip that one. The thing that I wanted to come back to is just that we are part of the land. The land is part of us, and that everything we are is connected to this. So when people say to me, well, you're in this building in the city, I can erase it almost in my mind because our ancestors were here. These buildings are superimposed on our villages. They're superimposed on our way of life and our culture and tradition. But more than that, we're still living in these cities that are built here today, and that we're still visible, but yet we're connected to our cultural ways of being and knowing, and our ceremonial life is very important. So I put slides to that. The things that I would say that institutions like Brown University can do is, one, they can tell the truth and allow their professors and their students to speak those truths. They can acknowledge the land. I'm not against people acknowledging the land, because to be honest, in New England, I feel that we're way behind the curve on this, and that I'm still trying to fight for some people to acknowledge whose lands they're on. Yes, they need to take it further than that, teach the full story, the full history, not just the Eurocentric perspective of that history. I think that they need to do a lot of work on decolonizing the way that they teach, but the way that we live in this place today. And I think when, you know, from a museum perspective, we talk about decolonizing, but my degrees are in education, and we need to decolonize education. That is what an ally could start to do. And they could start to value the Indigenous academics that are there and give them the freedoms to do what is necessary to express the history and the culture and the life ways from an Indigenous perspective, and not be bound by certain constraints that academia sometimes can enforce. But also to acknowledge and respect the first person voice of Indigenous communities. As a museum leader, I have been really pushing back hard on the idea that what's written in a formal sense, particularly from a white male perspective or any other perspective other than a first person perspective, is more valid than the first person voice. I don't know if I said that clearly, but what I'm getting at is people will come into our communities and interview our elders, write down everything that they had to say, put it in a book, twist it a bit, and make themselves the authority. And I'm saying to you that that elder is the authority on our culture, our tradition, our way of life, our knowledge, and what we call TEK often, traditional ecological knowledge of this land, this space that we're on, Nukasaki. It's really, really important to me in that we understand that. The big thing, I think, is becoming allies. I think that there's a lot of hidden places, like the Tomaquag Museum where I work, that have a lot of resources in the sense of knowledge in our archives and in our collection, and the people that we work with, our networks and circles, but we're not always valued in the same way that big institutions are valued, and we're not often given the same kind of resources in order to make those resources that we have, that extensive archive, available to those that are writing books and making films and creating artworks and things that are going to represent various times in our history as well as present day impacts of Indigenous people and what is happening here today. And so I think that that's something that allies could help with, that they may have the financial resources, but in reality we have a lot of direct community resources from Indigenous communities like the Narragansett people. I think through that, there's a lot of healing that can happen. And for me, that's around continuation. It's healing for my daughter, who's the one in the pink there, who's now a college student. I would like to see the day, and I'm not gonna, some people know where she goes to school, I won't bag the place, but her first class that she took on Indigenous studies at this institution, unfortunately for her, the professor was clueless and literally made them do a project that made up a native tribe and created their lifeways fictionally. But she and 2 other native students, so now 3 students out of that class, had to come out of their comfort zone, protecting themselves, and had to go and complain and try to get that to change. But this is the 21st century. In my opinion, my daughter shouldn't have to fight that fight, because I feel like I did that 30 years ago. And my parents before me and grandparents before them, we keep, in my opinion, fighting the same fight. And it's because it's systemic. Until we change the system and delivery of education in regards to Indigenous peoples and the intersection of our history and culture with every other history and culture that's happened since in the last 400 years, until we decolonize that, we can't move forward and stop repeating the mistakes of the past. And so, I think that those are the things that Brown University, the professors within, the students who are such great activists within can really help to change, and maybe be on a whole team of people to write a curriculum for the state to help support teachers that want to do it well but don't know where to go for the correct resources and the right materials and how to synthesize that for every grade level. And by the way, I can't do that by myself. I have been told over and over again I should just do it. I like in my free time, I'm gonna write a K-12 curriculum. And by the way, for free, because that's what they usually expect from Indigenous people. So I think with that, I will leave with the thought that, in my opinion, I'm preaching to choir right now, because people that come to this kind of an event are the people that are already buying into what we're saying. But what you can do is be an ally, and I'm gonna give you a job to do to try to kind of exponentially, everything you hear and learn today, try to tell 10 people and see if you can make that wave out of this room and into some action that can take place so that we can maybe change the narrative in the future. I feel for the people that would like to get rid of the land acknowledgements. However, I feel like in so many ways, the people I'm intersecting with, they're just starting to do that. So I'm not ready to give it up yet. I want them to do that and not or. And in my opinion, every conference that takes place, anytime there's a gathering of a group this size or more, there should be a land acknowledgement. And preferably by inviting someone from that local community to come in and give that land acknowledgement would be even better, and with a little honoraria. So I've been advocating on committees and groups that I'm on that they do that. A lot of times they want to get one Indigenous person and they're supposed to speak for everybody on every piece of land, and I don't think that's acceptable. I think that you need to find out who are the people that you're acknowledging, and if your conference moves from place to place, find someone from that place to be acknowledging that. With that, I think I will end, and I will just say that I hope I have a grandson who's 10 months old, my very first. I hope when he gets to college, he doesn't have the same circumstance that my daughter had, circumstances that I had to fight for the rights to express who I was as an Indigenous person and to be treated in a just manner and acknowledged for who I am and the lands I'm from and the culture that I've grown in my life in, and that will be that much farther along on the continuum. So, katabatash.
Wanikisak, Natasuis Nitana Hicks Greendeer, asa mula sa Tonquasu, ka nutomas masipiat at Massachusetts at ka wonk natai masipiat wonk wichi nasak ka wonk Liawi Nichon Nanonak. Hello, everyone. My name is Nitana Hicks Greendeer, and I am a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. I also live in Mashpee with my husband and my 4 children, almost 5 children. And thank you very much for having me today. And so first of all, one of the things that I want to say is that, so when I just introduced myself, I said that I am that I'm from this land, from Mashpee. And when you say in Wampanoag, my land, or my homeland, or my country, or anything like that that has to do with the land, there's this part of the word that means that it's like inseparable from your body, that makes those two things, that the person and that land, one thing. And so for me, the idea that, that this panel is attempting to talk about the idea of lands and, human interaction between like a university setting and community. Interacting with one is interacting with the other. So if we're talking about, our interactions at Brown with the land that Brown sits on, we're talking about interacting with the people that Brown sits on as well, or, well, sort of that Brown sits on. Guess that might have been a little Freudian slip. So, the people of the land that Brown sits on as well. And so getting back from there to back to this idea of land acknowledgements, I personally feel like land acknowledgements at this point, and I agree with what you're saying, I think they're not done enough here. And I feel like when they are done, it's almost always this sort of setting. It's, a conference or a reception of some sort or something more formal. I don't think that they take place, at the beginning of the semester in an English class, for example. And I think that's unfortunate, and I think they should. Because I think that, again, as you were saying, this sort of event draws in the people who already understand where Brown sits, or any institution for that matter. So I believe it's important to have that sort of acknowledgement in any, really drill it home, have it be at the beginning of every course. Every professor should know enough to say, after they've introduced themselves in the course and, or before it, this is where Brown University sits. This is, the 30-second blurb about, the fact that Wampanoag people and Narragansett people are still existing in this space, on this land, and as they have for thousands of years. So I think that's really critical, because if you walk around campus, I'm sure that the majority of people walking around here do not know that. Whether they've been here for, 8 months now at this point, or a 30-year career here. They may very well not know that. So I do think that's important. And so for myself, I'm, outside of being a postdoc fellow at Brown, I work for my tribe's language program. And right now I work as a fluency coach for the teachers of preschool and elementary school. But my background is mostly in education. I've worked sort of at all different levels in different capacities. But my hope, I guess, for Brown and the way that they interact with the community, the local Indigenous communities, is that I think Brown could really do a much better job of welcoming in local Native students. As an alum, when I was here, I was here as well as one other Narragansett woman at the same time. Right now I know there's at least one Narragansett student here. But other than that, I can't really, I don't know very many students who have been here over the last, 17, 18 years since I was a student here. In fact, I know of two women right now who are in college other places because they didn't get into Brown. And they are absolutely capable of being here. Both honor students, one from one of the best public charters in the country, and another from one of the best public schools in Massachusetts. So not, students who absolutely could have in some other circumstance, been accepted here. And I think that Brown, from what I understand, there's an admissions officer who does focus on Native students, but that the Northeast is not their region that they focus on. And so the area of the Northeast doesn't have someone focusing on Native student admission. And I think that's a huge gap in Brown's responsibility to the people of this community. Along with that as well, not necessarily at the college level, but I think Brown also could do more in the way of college readiness. So, I know a lot of colleges and universities in the area, or even prep schools, I think, in the area as well, have programs for Native students, along the lines of college readiness, or, what it's like to be on a college campus, essay writing workshops, all of these sorts of things. And I think that that's another area that Brown could get involved with, sort of helping the local Native community, because although the Native community, the student community at Brown is very small, it's always been very small, the percentage of students that are local is sometimes non-existent. I think that's really, it's more than unfortunate, it's wrong, considering that what Brown's history is for the communities here.
Thank you.
Osio. You can say that back. That's how we say hello. All right. Osio nagad. Raelee Nunkadi. Tokodoon. Aya Chalagi. Wodage. I'm sorry. I'm trying to perfect this introduction. One thing with colonization and the erasure of our ways is our languages are, they've been taken. So I've been working, diligently to learn this. So if you don't mind, I'll start over. Osio nagad, Raelee Nunkadi, Tokodoon, Aya Chalagi, Wodage, Didach, Kwasti, Anadisti. So, hello, my name is Raelee Fourkiller. I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and I'm a student here at Brown. I think I'd like to start off talking about where I come from. So I'm from Oklahoma, quite a ways from here, long flights, a lot of time spent in the airports. So I was predominantly raised in Comanche, Kiowa, and Apache lands down in the southwest portion of Oklahoma. So I've come to know like red dirt roads and tornadoes as home. But my people, right now they call home the northeast portion of Oklahoma. So I also know, rivers and creeks and hollers full of trees everywhere. So I come from these different lands, and I come from knowing different people from different nations as family. And what has been normal for me my entire life is seeing Native people in Walmart, or knowing people who only survive off commodities, or everybody knows what fry bread is. And so coming here, I felt lost the entire time. I remember I did this pre-orientation program. It was for people of color, people who represented minority communities. And we talked about the blizzard coming in. And, you know, I hope I don't offend anyone when saying this, but all the white students, you know, flooding onto the main green. And for me, it was scary. Every single class I've been in, every room I've been in, I've just been overwhelmed with feeling unwanted and unworthy of being here. You know, people talk about having imposter syndrome, but I think coming from a place where our education system was horrible, you know, I'm sure people are aware of like what's been happening in Oklahoma. Teacher walkouts, you know, undersourced schools, children who have books from 30 years ago in math, in English, and history. You know, I didn't come from schools that had AP classes or prepped us for college. We were just supposed to graduate and get a job. But I think it goes further to say where I come from, you know, we battle all these hardships. Children come from homes where alcohol is there, you know, we're constantly battling. And so showing up to school is a triumph for most families. And coming here and feeling invisible, I think, was the hardest thing to learn to deal with. Because when people see me, people don't say, oh, you know, she's probably Native, you know, ask her what tribe she is. One thing I've really gotten used to is, oh, your last name's cool. Where's that come from? And I'm just like, my family? But, you know, I've only been here, I guess, like 7 months, 8 months, not even that long. And a lot of this time I've been spending reflecting on what is missing and what needs to change. And I feel like easy things can come. Just making our presence known, making Wampanoag and Narragansett present known and visible. It could be easy. A flag, 2 flags to represent these nations. I know you guys have flags, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Out there, if you look on, there's the American flag. You know, what's missing? Those nation flags. Represent sovereignty, represent these people. Where's our art? You know, I see a bunch of white men in every single room, you know, their beady eyes staring. Where's baskets? Where's beadwork? Where's contemporary paintings, you know? It's that simple. And these things don't have to exist within museums or, you know, within like formal halls. They could be in the classrooms. You know, I made some notes so I don't get carried away. But
You can get carried away too.
okay, yeah, easy place. I think something even more important would be, you know, a garden. Where are our foods? Where are the native foods that grow here? You know, I've always grown up having a garden. My dad, he loves his tomatoes. So every summer we have tomato plants. You know, we have cucumbers and squash. But where are the 3 sisters? You know, we have plots where that could be. They could be developed. And I think that would start a process of students being able to work with the land and recognize that once you eat food from the land, you're fully welcomed into a space. And you form that connection and this reciprocity that in order to receive something, you must give. So you must give love and labor to get these benefits and be able to fully feel comfortable here. And I think, you know, just in my short time here, that's something that I have not felt. I've not felt comfort. I have not felt supported. That's not to say that I haven't made good connections with my community here, but our community is so small. and so underfunded and undersourced. You know, we don't have institutional support. And I think that's something that Brown really needs to work on. As Nitana was saying, college readiness and welcoming Native students onto this place so they know that they're wanted here or that this option is possible. But what about when they come here? What are they gonna find? 5 people in a room saying, oh, hey, you know, we're here, you know, we're the only thing that you've got, but we're trying. And I mean, that's really what it is now. Our community's small. And a lot of the stuff that we've been pushing for has only been made possible by us. And, you know, some of our faculty and staff, but even that, it's limited. You know, we've been talking about how can we move further past just land acknowledgements. And as these two have said, you know, I think land acknowledgements are important because when you recognize whose land you're on, you're calling in their ancestors and the people that are here today and who are trying to find a place to feel comfortable in. And so if we start off classes like that, you know, as a Native student, I would be like, oh, wow, like this professor like actually cares. Like, you know, if I said something, you know, they would listen to me because they recognize my identity and they see me. But I think to go further, I would call on our allies to put your connection to the land in your acknowledgement. You know, I've heard different student groups and different professors do it, but most of the time it sounds rigid and robotic and there's no emotion there. There's no personal connection. And you don't have to be Native to have a connection to the land. You hold your own memories and your own stories here. And where are those? So I would call on people to do that, you know. How do you see this land? Where do you find importance? Because we all do, whether that be like how pretty the sunsets here are sometimes, or how the main green looks on a sunny day when people are soaking up the sun. Or do you have a favorite food that grows here? You know, what's your favorite waterway? Think about that. That transmission of emotion makes, you know, last night, Ruth Neo and I, we were at this talk. This Native Hawaiian elder, her name was Manu, she talked about this. You know, the most accurate way to transmit knowledge is with emotion. So when you carry that with you, you let people know that that is important and you care about it and they should too. And so you're teaching the best way when you do that. I thought I had another thing to share. You know what? I'll pass it on. Maybe it'll come back later on. Thank you.
Yahlidu, Ruth Miller Shiiji, Thukutitsa Ninhadal, Danana Kanagashakun Kanash, Akukatnan Chuku Shakaya Kilanda, Shidaznaka Heather Kendall Miller, Stukta, Goyd Miller, Stunkta, Chiknekalikiriki. My name is Ruth Miller. I'm a Dena'ina Athabascan Alaska Native woman, a member of the Koryung tribe who was raised in Anchorage, Alaska. And just at first I wanted to share with Raelee that I learned my Dena'ina introduction when I was a freshman here, because I took the time to Skype with an elder back home twice a week when I was taking 5 classes. This is how I legally took 6 classes at Brown. And it was really hard, and we're all fighting for our languages. And any bit that you can wrap your tongue around, any bit that you can bring the memory of your ancestors back into your body is meaningful. The pronunciation, like Mena was saying last night, the pronunciation matters much less than the meaning behind it. Yeah, so you're not alone in that. So I was raised in Anchorage, Alaska, far, far away, a bit farther than Oklahoma. And the first thing that I always tell people about Alaska is that it is fundamentally a Native space. Alaska, as a state, has the highest population of federally recognized Native peoples in the United States. And we represent over 5 different language groups, over 3 different tribal families, and we have fought for a long, long time to make sure that we remain relevant throughout contemporary development in the state. And so that means being able to see Native people and cousins when you go to Walmart too, but it also means having an Alaska Native medical center. It means having art everywhere. I am certainly not saying that I am satisfied whatsoever with governance systems in Alaska and Alaska Native representation in our state. But when I came to college, I suddenly felt a lack of that. I think I should begin by saying that I don't know that I want a land acknowledgement. I want a land connection. I want a land relationship. And I don't think that is enough to acknowledge land or to acknowledge people if that is the full extent of our authentic interaction with at least as a Native person. And I think that a land acknowledgement is an important and crucial first step. But I think that Brown University in particular should be doing an awful lot more. When I came to Brown my freshman year, 4 years ago now, I was so lonely. I was devastatingly lonely. Being so far from home, there are no mountains here. The tallest point in Rhode Island is the top of the Sciences Library, which is 13 stories. And I felt completely out of place, particularly as an Alaska Native student with a very, very small population of Native American students here. I didn't have many people that I could relate to, even among the Indigenous community at Brown, because our culture was born from a different land. It was born from a different region. But I was so blessed to have the mentorship of a number of incredibly strong, incredibly resilient women here on campus who at that time were seniors. My first year, within the first few months, we had already planned and led a protest for Indigenous Peoples Day, demanding that the university rename it from Fall Weekend, formerly called Columbus Day. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of my time at Brown. My sophomore year, I was also a co-director of the student organization Natives at Brown, and this year, as was mentioned, I work with NEO for the Native American Heritage Series, which plans public and community-wide engagements on Native issues on campus. But although I started my career at Brown with this ethos of activism and the student work, I have continuously felt that burden has never left the shoulders of the students. If we have community here, if we have any community here, it's because we've made it for ourselves and we've fought for it for ourselves while also being students at an Ivy League university. I also came from public school, and I don't know that I was prepared for the extreme academic, the rigorous academic demands at a place like this. And to not have, I don't want to say privilege, but to not have the kind of casual free time of not being a Native student means that I need to devote as much time as I would have had to taking care of myself, to creating a community as well. So now we have the burden of not only surviving at the school academically and making friends and going to the grocery store and eating well and sleeping, but we also have the burden of fighting to be Native students on campus. We're not welcome to bring our full selves here. And that is something that I haven't seen change. Our students are still, our students with our former alumni, or our alumni and our former students and our faculty allies put in a disproportionate amount of work that's simply not echoed by the administration. And so when I was first starting to think about what types of demands I would make, in addition to the ones I already make, I began thinking about what would it mean for this institution to systemically begin supporting Native people. And I think it comes back to that same foundational sense that acknowledgement is not enough. What we need is to nurture deep connection so that as students are passing through this space for 4 years, they understand that they're entering a place that has nurtured cultures and nurtured people. that has its own unique history and that has a living relationship with the people who live here. This isn't just a city on a hill. It's a land that means something. And so I would love to see like orientation programming that is required attendance for all the students. We already have that established. Why not include a session on what this land is, who is in relationship with it, who are the indigenous tribes of the area, and what does that mean? And what protocols do you need to respect while you're here? What type of relationship are you going to create with the land while you're here? I mean, I think that if we could infuse this type of education, not just in individual classrooms, but on an administratorial level, if we could infuse this relationship with one of respect and love and care, I think that people would have a fundamentally different experience here, because I draw my strength and I draw my security and my love from my time on my land, and being here feels like a fundamentally toxic thing because I don't have trees, I don't have forests, I don't have mountains, I don't really have water. Being in this little, couple blocks. And so when I feel drained and when I feel tired, it becomes my burden to find a way to get to a state park, to find a way to go out of what's accessible to me, go beyond what's convenient for me within a busy schedule, and to find my own healing, because it's not something that's supported by this place here. And I think that if we were able to institutionalize a fundamentally different relationship with this space, it would mean profound things not only for making Indigenous students want to be here and want to stay here, but I think that it would mean that even non-Indigenous students leaving this land would have a new relationship and understanding of what it means to caretake for this world. I mean, I don't think that it would be extraordinarily difficult to have a shuttle, a free shuttle, a Brown University free shuttle that goes to Lincolnwood State Park every weekend, to make that an accessible space for students to get away from cars, to get away from these buildings. And I think that it's a matter of who empowers prioritizing what. And it's, in my opinion, it's about time.
Ate she Niyolpaqui Chicho Kwali Moraza-Keeswood Yinishiet Nakadne Nishlet Tabaha Bashis Chin Chichimeka Dashichet Lachina Dashanalet. Hello everyone, my name is Neo Moraza-Keeswood. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation as well as Chichimeka people. But I also I grew up here in Massachusetts in Plymouth, and so I'm related to the Peters family with the Mashpee Wampanoag community. And so those are the people who I grew up with and really shaped my time here in Massachusetts. And yeah, so I work here as a coordinator for our Native Studies program, finishing up 3 years in this position, and I'm the inaugural coordinator for this initiative. We started back up in 2016. We started this Native Studies initiative, and very much going off what Ruth and others were saying, this initiative is something that came out of student protest, student activism, and not something that the university itself was like, hey, let's do this. There had to be some sort of external force to make it happen, which is kind of that common thread I think you'll see throughout any of the resources that you might see for Brown for Native students. Really, a lot of the things that we have now that are things that came out of that student protest. In particular, our Native women who that really led those movements really want to acknowledge that. So I'm an alum from class of 2016 as well, so I've been here at Brown around 7 or so years. A very long time, and like Theresa said, I will actually be finally moving away and starting a grad program in the fall, which I'm very excited about. Yeah, so really, I appreciate all the words that you all said, and really want to echo a lot of that. I think when it comes, so my job right now within our Native Studies initiative, we're working on constructing a land acknowledgement. So I'm actually in the process of really looking at a lot of other universities. What are they using? What are kind of the building blocks for constructing a great land acknowledgement. And I find a lot of them often kind of stick with that standard, oh, we want to acknowledge that we're on the occupied lands of so-and-so people. And it kind of stops at that. I think some of the ones that really have stuck out are those that go take that next step and really want that acknowledge or want individuals to acknowledge that the histories of the land and the histories of the forced and systematic removal of Indigenous peoples, and be unapologetic about acknowledging that, as well as stating that this land acknowledgement, it does not absolve settler colonial privilege or diminish colonial structures of violence. And going back, my mind's on Game of Thrones, the premiere is coming up soon, but the idea of words are wind. And I think a lot of what is happening today, especially when in set of land acknowledgements kind of intertwining with social justice practice, that it kind of is getting into that place of performativity. And again, echoing what you all were saying, we want to go beyond that and thinking about what are, I guess, again, actions speaking louder than words. And so thinking, okay, now like going beyond, what is the university actually going to do to support our both Indigenous students here and faculty, staff at Brown, but also building up that relationship with our local Native communities. Sorry, my notes are all jumbled up. And so something that happened recently to me the other day when we were talking about land acknowledgements, there's a professor here someone who's in charge of one of the organizations at Brown. We were talking about land acknowledgements, and that they didn't think, they kind of felt, oh, it's something that would be very repetitive to stay in, like, oh, our attendees of our weekly lectures, they'll get tired of hearing this every single lecture. And then beyond that, they took another step, being that I don't feel comfortable saying certain things, like acknowledging like the systematic removal of Indigenous peoples, mentioning that, like, the colonialism, essentially. And I was just sitting in my chair, like, cringing so much, because in my opinion, like, a land acknowledgement is something that should unsettle you as a settler, and it's kind of taking that first step, and really understanding why you feel so uncomfortable about having this land acknowledgement at the beginning of every lecture, and it really surprised me to hear that from this certain individual who will go unnamed. But I think going beyond that, what can the university do to have a relationship with our local nations? For one, going off what Ruth was saying, a lot of the current relationships I see us having today, whether it's with the Tomaquag or just individual community members, a lot of those relationships that I think we talk a lot about, Brown has with these communities, are those that were built by Indigenous peoples, like Elizabeth Hoover, myself, other people, like being able to connect with them directly. I don't know, has anyone outside of Native studies and like within the higher level administration?
Not high level administration, but lots of different departments connect with Tomaquag Museum, and it's getting more and more over time. So it's a slow process though.
But it's on the, so I've been
Slavery and justice, things like that.
exactly, a lot of our pure centers, but getting to the point of what have any higher level administration ever really interacted with local nations, and to the point, to my knowledge, that is a no. Or do they know who are the leaders, the chiefs of these local tribes? Do they know who the council members are? Do they know who the clan mothers are, who are actually the real leaders in the community? And I think there's such that a lot of time when it comes to, I think Brown is at the point where when it comes to connecting with these local leaders or whatnot, they look towards the Native Studies Initiative or others that already have those relationships. But I don't, again, think that higher level administration, whether it's a provost or president, that have ever been in shared space with a lot of these leaders, which is what needs to happen. And I lost my track of that. Because that's what it, like, these are interacting with sovereign nations, and thinking how some of these these communities feel like when you send a coordinator of Native studies to go interact with someone who's like running the show. And beyond that is also like we're a lot of times I think there's an approach of like, oh, we want to build these relationships to have almost an exploitative manner, as opposed to just having that relationship, to have that relationship with someone, like having those meaningful relationships and going, and I think really taking away from our lecture yesterday with Manu is being able to interact on an emotional level, and even just be able to share that space and talk story, and really humanize someone. I think we get so caught up with like, as administrators, like boom, 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 we always gotta have that agenda and something to work through, but we don't really get beyond that to building those meaningful relationships. And to also, when it comes to the relationships with tribes, is I think not going in with, oh, we want these resources from you, but how can we really work together in a cooperative way? Again, that's not exploitative. I have more thoughts.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think beyond within Brown too, it's what resources are currently existing both for students and our faculty and staff. I think I'm one of the only staff members employed here at Brown that actually, within my job description, it's working with both our Native students and faculty, and really engaging in Native scholarship. But I'm one person. And so a lot of time here at Brown, the common narrative is, if you're Native, the students will come to you and they'll want your help, but we have our faculty who are nonstop trying to publish, trying to write, and they're just completely like, as it is, as faculty, staff of color on this campus, that's the common narrative of just piling so many responsibilities on you, like working multiple jobs, and then having the added responsibility of wanting to look out for our family, our students, because I see us, we are a very close-knit family. But where are those additional resources? Like, that's something I would hope for moving forward, that we're able to have another administrator who is able to really actively support our Native students, and that's their sole function, because that's really what we need at this point. And someone that is able to really always like be in touch with our students. Because for me, that's one of my, like, what I would love to be able to do, but it's hard to be able to take that responsibility on, as well as running an entire academic initiative. And I think that's one of those common threads throughout Brown, and a lot of also my colleagues really talk about a lot as staff of color. We're always the ones that the university comes to and looks to put on that, like, additional unpaid labor, I guess you would say.